a great guy named Graham Bass, and it's called Jungle Drums, and it's adapted for us this morning. So once upon a time, there was a really little warthog who lived in Africa. And the warthog's name was Ngiri, and Ngiri used to get picked on by all the other warthogs because he was so small and he wasn't the best mud wrestler, and they had this thing where they do a pyramid of warthogs, and it's called the Pyramid Warthog Mud Fountain. And the person on top spooks mud out of the thing, and it's a big ritual thing. And he couldn't do it. He was too small to be one of the bottoms, too shaky to be one of the top. And so all the rest of the warthogs made fun of him mercilessly. But Ngiri had a wise mother, and the wise mother said that they're probably making fun of you because of all of those other animals who live across the river. You see, these warthogs, they all pretty much look the same, and they like to do the same thing, rolling around in the mud with the wrestling and the fountain. But across the river, there were these amazing animals. There were zebras and elephants and giraffes and cheetahs, all brightly colored, all totally different looking, and the warthogs really wanted to be one of them. So since they couldn't be like them, they used to make fun of Ngiri. He was really sad, and so he finally left and went walking around trying to find some help. And he went to the big water buffalo, who lived a little bit apart from everybody else and was cool enough that they didn't need the approval of either the fancy-looking animals or the mud-wrestling animals, and just kind of had its own inner peace. And the water buffalo said to him, "Here, what's the matter? I see that you're so sad." He said, "Everybody's picking on me. I have no idea what to do about it." And he says, "Well, I have something that might help. This was given to me generations ago by a very wise warthog, and it only seems right that I give it to you now. It's a set of magic bongos." He said, "Tonight, as the moon is at the highest point it'll be at, you go and you play these bongos in the middle of the night. You make your wish, and then the next morning your wish will be fulfilled. But be careful, because your wish might not exactly get fulfilled the way you think you want it." So sure enough, that night, the moon was at its highest point, and Ngiri took off to the middle of the woods and started playing the bongos, and played the bongos, made the wish, went home, went back to bed, and then the next morning woke up all excited and looked at himself thinking he was going to be huge and beautiful and totally different. But he was exactly the same. He was a little disappointed, so he walks out, and all of a sudden he hears a commotion outside of his house. All the other warthogs were gathering around and saying, "What is this? This is the weirdest thing." And he turned the corner, and every one of the warthogs was colored with a different design of a totally different animal. So there was a warthog that looked like a zebra with the black and white stripes. There was a warthog with a big, long trunk like an elephant. There was another warthog with cheetah spots all over them. And they were prancing around, and they were saying, "We are so beautiful." And all of the animals on the other side of the river, the elephants and the giraffes and the cheetahs, they all looked like warthogs. All of the distinguishing features were gone. They all had these little tusks, and they were all pretty much the same color, and they all kind of wanted to wrestle in the mud for the first time in their lives. And they looked across, and they saw all these warthogs colored with these brilliant patterns, and they said, "The warthogs have cast a spell on us." Meanwhile, Ngiri comes around, seeing both sides of the river, and he's thinking, "Oh my God, what have I done?" And that day it got worse and worse, and people started getting crazier and crazier. And so he took off to the middle of the night when the moon was at its highest, and he took the drums, and he frantically beat on the drums, and he tried, and he wished, and he wished, and he wished. And he wished so hard that he fell asleep right there. And the next morning, he woke up, and he went back into the rest of his family and the rest of his friends, and he looked, and sure enough, all of these had the exact same patterns on them. There were zebra-looking warthogs, and there were the elephant-looking warthogs, and there were the cheetah-looking warthogs. And all the way across on the other side of the river, he hoped at the very least that the colors had gone back to the other animals. And they had. But the wrong colors were on the wrong animals. So there was a big elephant with the stripes like the zebra, and there was a giraffe with this long trunk, and it was all mixed up. And they were even angrier. And they stormed across the river, and they said, "Warthogs, you cast a spell on us." And the warthogs stormed back, and they said, "Well, we don't even want to look like you anymore." So the warthogs, they couldn't play around in the mud in quite the same way because they were concerned about their spots, and it just didn't have quite the same freedom to get messy and rough and tumble when you looked that pretty. And they were sick of it They were totally done. And they said, but we don't want to look like this either. And there was Ngiri in the middle of it all, and he said, my bad. I played the drums, and I made the wish, and I'm sorry, I just didn't want to be picked on anymore. And so that night, he went back, and for the last time, he played the drums when the moon was at its highest. And he just prayed and wished that everything went back to normal. Even if it meant that he was going to get picked on, even if it meant that he was never going to be in the mud fountain pyramid, just wanted everything to be back to normal. And sure enough, the next morning, it was everyone looked as they had 3 days before. The warthogs gleefully played in the mud. But the one thing that was different is from then on, they didn't see the people on the other side of the river so much as the other. Because they had been in their skin. And they were so happy to be themselves again. They stopped picking on Ngiri. In fact, they invited him to play drums as they built their mud fountain pyramid. And all together, the big fancy animals pranced around, and they played the drums, and they spewed the mud, and they wrestled, and everyone knew from then on that all they had to be was themselves. And the ways that they were different was exactly the way they needed to be together. So we invite you all to rise in body, rise in spirit, and join in our next hymn, and we can all go out to the atrium.